All right, so we started talking last couple of nights about Bdikat Chametz, and talking about Bdikat Chametz. If you leave your home early, you're not going to be there. When you have to check, how you have to check, etc. A few people asked during the shiur and afterwards, what about Mechirat Chametz? What about you just going to go and sell everything? And the truth is, all this whole sugya gets very complicated and very confusing because, as I said, Mechirat Chametz comes in much, much later. If you look in the Torah tells us about Bal Yara'eh or Bal Yemetzeh. It says you can't own chametz on Pesach. It doesn't say anything about selling it. We look in Chazal, we look in the Mishnah, and the Gemara talks about two obligations that we have of bitul chametz and of bdika and biur chametz. Right? So where does selling chametz come from? Seemingly, if you've done bitul and you've done bdika and you've done biur, so there's nothing left. Okay, but as we know, it's never that simple. But the truth is that there is a Tosefta that talks about Mechirat Chametz, but the Tosefta talks about a situation where a Jew finds himself Erev Pesach on a ship, and he's there, and there's a non-Jew as well. You've got your Chametz with you. There's nothing that you can do. The only way, and again, there's going to be a great monetary loss afterwards, the only way that you can salvage it, because you can't own it on Pesach in any way, shape, or form, you can sell it to the non-Jew who's with you. But the sale there that the Tosefta is talking about is a sale like any sale that we know. It's an actual, genuine transaction. You give him the chametz, he takes the chametz, he gives you the money, the transfer of ownership takes place, there's a kinyan, the whole thing, right? When we talk today about mechirat chametz, in most circumstances, and this is why not everybody wants to rely on it, and there are those who don't rely on it at all, and it's not without good reason. Because many times, how do you do mechirat chametz? The times will come out next week when you can do it. You come to the Rav and you say, "I appoint you as the shaliach to sell my chametz. What are you selling? Where is it? Who's buying it?" You have no idea who's buying it. He has no idea what the chametz is or where the chametz is. And people want to come along. I'm going to sell you the things in my cupboard. I'm going to sell you the cupboards. I'm going to sell you the house. I'm going to sell you the pots and pans. I'm going to sell you the time of chametz that's balua in the pots and pans. All these things which come up, and what is all this? So let me just say that in terms of the last factor, there is no need, and a person should know there is certainly no need to sell your pots and pans that are chametz of Pesach. Okay, there's absolutely no issur whatsoever of owning chametz, of owning pots and pans that have been used for chametz. Okay, if you have more than a kazayit of actual chametz that's left in your pots and pans after they've been cleaned, then you have other problems, not chametz, right? Once upon a time it was different. They weren't able to clean. There were holes in the things, and the things couldn't get cleaned so well, and whatever. Nowadays, okay. So that's in terms of the pots and pans and the plates, etc., we're not worried about. More than that, there are those who say, if you're going to sell your kelim for Pesach, so then you're going to sell them, they're now owned by a non-Jew. When you buy them back, there's a whole question. You have to go back and toivel them again. Okay, so I'm not suggesting to anybody that we need to go and toivel the whole kitchen after Pesach. Don't sell the pots, the pans, and the kelim. Okay, there's another question that sometimes people say, and you see this on some of the shtarot of the mechirat chametz. They say, okay, we're worried about the ta'am of the chametz that's been absorbed. I'm not going to sell the pots themselves, but I'm going to sell the flavor of the chametz that's been absorbed into the walls of the pot when I cooked. I mean, I'll ask you, have you ever purchased, the flavor that's absorbed into the pots? I mean, it sounds to me that really turns, and this is why those who don't include this on the shtar, right? It turns the whole thing into a chucha v'tlula. It turns the whole thing into a bit of a joke. Besides the fact that is not necessary. There's nothing tangible. We're talking about Bal Yara'eh or Bal Yemetzeh, right? There's nothing you can see. It's nothing you can find. There's nothing tangible about the taste of chametz was once absorbed into the pots, and therefore that be sold. If you are going to sell something, what do you need to sell? If you have actual chametz, if you have actual, which for whatever reason you can't get rid of, you can't dispose of, and the most common example is whiskey. I think that's the most common thing which is chametz which they want to sell. You have on Mecharat Chametz, all the big companies and all the big bakeries and Osem and whatever, and all these supermarket chains, etc. They have a lot of chametz. If you're going to tell all the companies now that before Pesach comes in, you have to go and destroy all of your chametz, okay, so there's never going to be chametz again in Medinat Israel. So that's not. So then you can rely on, there's a great monetary loss. Then you can rely on the sale. We have to know the sale has to be done in the proper way, and this is why when it's done, we do all sorts of different kinyan and all different forms of different things to try and make it as good as possible. Okay, so a question here which comes up is the following: we spoke about somebody's not going to be at home, and you don't want to do the bdikat chametz, even though I explained to you last night that if I'm not going to be at home and I need to do bdikat chametz the night before I leave, it's very, very straightforward. It's not a complicated process in terms of checking for whatever chametz I have left behind in the house where I'm not kashering, I'm not going to be in for Pesach. But nonetheless, many people come along and say, even that I don't want to do, not able to, I want to just close up shop, I want to sell the whole house and rely on Mecharat Chametz, and therefore I don't have any obligation for bdika. So that's a question that comes up. So the question is, first of all, would that even work? Is it possible? And it's not so clear. So I'll read to you what Rav Melamed says here on the Pnei Halacha. The title of the seif is Im Maskarat Kol Habayit Legoy Potarto Mibdika. In other words, does selling, already renting, we'll see why, we're going to rent the house as opposed to sell the house, would that exempt us from the bdika? So he says like this, Yesh mishpachot shenosot mibeitam lekol yemei HaPesach. There are those, believe it or not, there are those families who travel, go away for all of Pesach. They don't want to clean, they don't want to check, they don't want to search. Is it possible that by selling the house or by renting out the house to a non-Jew, I would be exempt from the bdika? So we have here a major machloket amongst the poskim. Again, before I get into the question of if you should do it, if it's kedai, if it's the right thing, the first question is, does it work to exempt me if the house, which is my house, which I live in the entire year, but I'm leaving for Pesach, if I'm going to add the whole house onto the shtar of the Mecharat Chametz, would that exempt me from the obligation of checking for Chametz before I leave? So on the one hand, we have poskim who say, yesh makilim, sheho'ilu b'fo'al habayit eno b'rishoto be'erev Pesach. Since I get to Erev Pesach, and it's not going to be my house because I'm selling it, okay, then in such a situation, then even now, when I leave, right, I'm not selling it for the duration of the whole time that I leave, but just for the time of Pesach, but there are those who say I would be exempt. However, there are other poskim, again, there's a big machloket in Yachronim. He says, Rabbim machmirim, there are many who are stringent on this. Sheho'il v'yitgoreh b'bayit hazeh b'toch 30 yom shelifnei Pesach. Remember, 30 yom lifnei sholim dorshim. We keep saying that once we're within the period of 30 days before Pesach, certain obligations related to Pesach kick in. So since I was in the house and it was where I live within the 30 days before Pesach, there are those who say already I have the obligation of checking. And only later on maybe I could become exempt, but there are those who say that since it was my house within 30 days, I'm obligated to check it, even if just before Pesach I'm going to sell it. B'nosaf lekach, another factor which is added, that is it correct to uproot myself from the obligation of this mitzvah which Chachamim established? So he says, he and many poskim recommend as follows. He says, if you want to go down this route and you want to fulfill all the opinions, or as many opinions as possible, you could go and you could sell, or you could rent out the entire house with the exception of one of the rooms. What do we gain by that? That room that I'm keeping, that's going to be still my room when I'm not there. I will go and I will do the b'dikat chametz. According to everybody, I'll be chayav to do b'dikat chametz in that room. Okay, and the other rooms I wouldn't have to check in such a scenario. Okay, then he adds on another factor. He says, "Be'eretz Yisrael asurim kol bayit anochim." There's a halacha that in Eretz Yisrael, right, it relates to Lot Chonem and other things. You can't go and you're not allowed to. We have a mitzvah b'yishuv Eretz Yisrael. We shouldn't be selling our houses out to a non-Jewish population, and therefore he says, "Okay, צריך לציין בשטר מכירת חמץ שמדובר בהשכרה ובנוסף לכך יש למכור את החמץ שנמצא בכל החדרים המושכרים." So then, if that's the scenario, he says you have to rent out the house and you have to sell the chametz that's in the house. Okay. In that way, he says, "B'zei patru minivdok totam hachadarim." Okay, there's another advice there which is brought about in terms of selling the house. If you sell it not on Yud Daled, but you sell it the day before on Yud Gimel, before the Chovah kicks in, then you would then that may exempt you as well. Again, this is a very, very technical discussion. I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, which is we think about the whole procedure of the Mechirat Chametz. Right? If the idea is we want to make it as serious a sale as possible, we're not just going to throw in everything. Yeah, literally, you're throwing in everything in the kitchen sink. Right? You're going to just sell the chametz. You're saying, no, I'm going actually and I'm buying the house. The non-Jew who's coming along on Erev Pesach and he's buying the chametz from the Rabbanut. What's he buying? He's buying the pasta and the whiskey and the this and the that and the flour, whatever. And he's buying a few houses. It makes the whole thing sound a little bit disingenuous, in my opinion. It makes the whole thing sound a little bit strange. But there are those who allow it. Now, I'll just read you the final paragraph, which relates to what we said at the beginning. He says, "Legabei klei ochel v'tanur." Okay, so if you are selling your whole house for Pesach, so you're selling, he says, what about the kelim, right? All the dishes and the oven, etc. So yesh lenakotam lifnei Pesach mikol mamashut chametz. This is important. When if a person is, let's assume you're not going to go down this route necessarily of selling your house, or you have an oven which you're not going to use on Pesach, so you definitely don't need to spend anything more than 5 minutes cleaning an oven that you're not going to use on Pesach. You know, an oven that you plan on using, you have to kasher, etc. Is one required to kasher the oven that I'm not going to be cooking in? So no. It says we have to clean it out if there's any mamashut, if there's any actual bits of chametz, there's crumbs inside, there's pieces of food or whatever. You have to get rid of those. You have to take those out so that you won't have actual ocha and you won't have chametz. He says chametz shavar lava pesach, but more than that I don't have to do. He says nemkot hakelim legoy lo kedai. As we said at the beginning, it's not recommended to sell your kelim Pesach, mishum shachlei Pesach yitzarchu letovlam b'mikveh kedin kelim sheniknu migoy. Now you're coming and you're purchasing back the kelim from which belong to a non-Jew of a Pesach, so then you'd have to go and you'd have to toivel them again. And he writes here, limkot hachametz she'aleihem v'shebalo b'hem hu davar tamur. He says to sell the chametz that's stuck to the plates, that's inside the plates, whatever. He says that doesn't really seem to make any sense, and therefore you should not do that either. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Shomer Tzakadosh Baruch Hu Tzedakot Yisrael Tchach B'Alem Torah Mitzvot Shnei Amad